welcome to our Facebook Live. Guidestone is starting to do our high altitude garden series, which will normally be on Monday afternoons at 4:30, but we're starting it off with a little bonus one today. Today we're going to talk about making a germination chamber. It's really important to get our germination chambers. Germination chambers are really important to help get some of our seedlings off to the right start. They're important for us because we don't have any heaters in our high tunnel or in the dome. And so for the seeds that really need to be warm to germinate, we can keep them from freezing usually in these structures, but some things like tomatoes and peppers want it to be like 70 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit to germinate. So this is a place where we do that. This is the first germination chamber I built. I built it last year. We already had the metal shelving, so that really helped because this shelving is nice. It has all these holes in it so that water can drain right through. I took some extra plastic that I had extra old greenhouse plastic that I cut a piece that would fit around most of it. And then this one has these two doors. This was the back of a IKEA shelving unit that collapsed, and so I used it. And you can just see that this isn't fancy. We just did what we had to do to make it work. It's not so much pretty, but the doors are attached, or the plastic is attached to the doors with some duct tape, and then the doors, I made hinges out of zip ties. I drilled holes in the door right above each of the four shelves, and then I zip tied them to make hinges. So they're not the smoothest doors, but they work. And then to give myself enough room to make the fourth shelf of plants, I dropped the shelf a little bit below the top of the uprights, and then I used some of our hoops to try and make sure that we could take the plastic a little bit over and we could have at least short plants in the very top. On the bottom, so that there's less air leaking in from below at night, I used some extra of our styrofoam trays. I don't want it to be right up underneath the bottom because I want the water to be able to drain out, but it probably would make it a little bit warmer if I got it a little closer. Last year I just used this with 3 shelves because I hadn't figured out how to reset the fourth one until it was too late and it was all full of plants. And so the upgrades I made to this year was to reset the height of the shelves so that I could still get in and water it fairly easily. It's not too short, and so that I could add these hoops. The way we seal it up at night is we use these binder clips. And I roll this forward, and then I'm going to pull it down until I can clip it to the bottom of this shelf. I'm going to have to do it on both sides. I'm pretty short, so I need a step ladder for this. And then in the morning, I kind of roll it back and just clip the plastic to the top of the hoop so that it has a little bit more venting during the day. The way this really works is at the bottom I have a Hydrofarm heat mat. So I got one that was 5 feet by 20 inches. So most of them come with this 20-inch width that's set to fit the 10-20 trays that we use. And then you can buy it at any length. So I got one that is 5 feet because that will cover most of the bottom of this germination chamber. And really I probably should only try and fit 5 trays across on these, so the very edge trays are sort of half hanging off of the germination mat, of the heat mat, and so I have to turn them around every once in a while because sometimes we'll see that we get one side of the tray that germinates before the other one. So that's how I use this germination chamber. I do close it every night. I push the 2 doors closed, and if it's really going to get cold, I'll add another just loose piece of plastic over the top in case I have any leaks. It's worked pretty well. You can set these heat mats to any temperature between, I think, 60 and 90 degrees. You might even be able to set them higher. I have 2 mats, and they're what's called daisy chained together. So this mat is plugged into the first mat, which is actually plugged into the thermostat. And we'll look at that next. So based on the successes and challenges of the first germination chamber that I built last year, we built this one this year. So I got another set of the same kind of metal shelving because it's fairly sturdy and we can use it. We can hose it all down and sanitize it all, and we'll be able to use it in a walk-in cooler to store vegetables when we build one. You can see I've set the shelves at the same height. That seems to be a height that works pretty well. The one improvement that I made that I'm really happy with is that on this one I had this piece of a little bit more rigid plastic, and so it still has the hoops to help hold that up, but it just feels a little bit more stable at the top. And because I didn't have any more doors, I needed to figure out how to close this off at night. So we just taped a piece of plastic to the top, to the roof, and it rolls down. And then at night we take these binder clips. It has enough overlap over the side plastic. We take these binder clips and we clip it on. And actually the side plastic has this tape on it this was the side plastic we used on that germination chamber last year, so it still had the tape on it that was left over from taping it to the doors. But I find it really helpful because it makes that inside plastic a little stiffer to be able to clip these binder clips. And I will binder clip it all the way down, and then I'll usually set a rock on it at the bottom just to make sure it doesn't blow around. And this one has been pretty warm as well. They've been staying really warm at night and when it's sealed up. And then during the day, I vent it because this high tunnel on its own can get up to about 104 if it gets windy and it's sunny, and so I can't open it at the same time. And so also I want to try and make sure that we are keeping some like airflow in with these. In general, I want to make sure that they stay relatively humid, but even if I roll this back up and it has that airflow, it'll still stay relatively humid anyway. And then what I'm watching for is making sure that the surface is staying wet, but also that the surface has occasionally a time to start drying out once things have germinated. If they're things that we just planted, we want to make sure that that surface and then that seed stays wet all the way until it germinates. Once they've started growing up, sometimes we can have problems with a little bit of algal growth on the surface, and it'll look like sort of green. The problem with the algae growth is that a lot of times it'll cap the soil, and then when you water it, that water can't go through the algae crust, and so then your plant dries up even though you're watering it regularly. If you do start seeing a little bit of an algal crust, you can literally go over and sort of break it up with your fingers, but you should be really cautious about watering it after that, and make sure that you water it. To prevent the algal crust, it's better to water it deeper, like first thing in the morning, so that it stays moist at least below the surface, and then let the surface dry out a little bit once plants are germinated. And once they have the roots, it can go down deeper into the pot to get the water that's down here because you watered it heavier, and not be dependent on the water right on the surface. So I thought we would do a little tour also of what we have growing here. So right now, the heat mats are where we put the things that we're just seeding so that they can germinate. So we just seeded zucchini and watermelon. And you can see we have some tomatoes and peppers that are germinating here. Looks like the tomatoes are all up and the peppers aren't. It's kind of pushing it on how late we can do peppers, but because we will be able to plant them into the dome, we'll have a longer season on the back end. So even if we don't get them started to catch the very beginning of the season on the front end, I think it'll still work out. We'll have a couple different successions of tomatoes and peppers so that we have them as long as we can throughout the summer. And then on the right side we have some popcorn that we're starting inside. I'm going to try and use the popcorn partly as we're going to try and build like a little kids popcorn room where they can go in and be surrounded by the corn. And then in another place I'm going to use it as part of my annual windbreak to try and take the edge off some of the wind in the backfield. Up here we have some lettuce that we're doing for our plant sale. We'll have 2 plant sales. One will be Saturday, May 16th in the afternoon, and that'll have the cool crops that are ready to go out then. So that'll be lettuce and kale and broccoli and cabbage and chard. And then we'll have those crops again along with tomatoes and pepper and basil and some zucchini and summer squash and cucumbers Saturday, June 6th. So watch our website for some more details about how you can pre-order things and what time and how the pickup will work as we try and adapt this to the stay-at-home order and wherever we're at in the process at that point. So we have some lettuce for the plant sale. We have some more tomatoes and some okra. We have some peppers. We just seeded some flowers like zinnias and nasturtium. We have some really early cucumbers that are going to be here in the high tunnel. They did really well last year. It's a variety that you can trellis up so they don't take up as much room. And then on the top, we have all of our earliest tomatoes and cherry tomatoes that are also going to be in this high tunnel or the other high tunnel. Let's go take a quick look at what's in the other one. So here we have some more of our plant sale items. All of the ones that we're selling May 16th will be in 4-packs. That's the lettuce and cabbage and broccoli and kale and chard. We have some kohlrabi that we're doing for one of our early CSA shares. Some more kale for that. And we have some other potted up peppers and tomatoes that are a little bit further behind. So we do try and stage things. We try and plant as many peppers and tomatoes and cherry tomatoes as and cucumbers as we're gonna do in our high tunnels. And then like a couple weeks later, when we know we can probably plant outside, even if we need to cover it, we'll seed things that will be the tomatoes and things like that for there. If we really start having a late spring, the way I would manage this is that I have a few 4-inch pots, so they're bigger pots. So if these tomatoes they're going crazy and they're really expanding and they're outgrowing these smaller pots, we can always pot them up and keep them in the high tunnel or in the dome until it's warm enough for them to be outside, because they won't tolerate a frost. And then up top we also have a few basil plants, and basil really doesn't like to get below about 37 degrees Fahrenheit, so that's why even though these are fairly large plants, we're keeping them here in the germination chamber so that we can make sure that we can tuck them in at night and make sure they stay alive and healthy. Once we get through this weekend, the rest of our 10-day forecast looks like we might be able to take these basil out, and we might have to do that when we start all of our pumpkins. We grow as many pumpkins as we can for Guidestone's annual pumpkin patch. Last year we grew 500, and this year the crop plan, we're trying to grow 1,200 of the pumpkins, which is all the ones we did last year. We'll see how far I make it. We don't have quite as much room, but as we could use, but we will grow a lot of pumpkins, and so those will all get started in the heat mats, on the heat mats in the germination chambers, because they like it pretty warm. I don't know if there's anybody on there who has any comments or questions, but if you see this and want to ask me a question about germination chambers, you can comment below, and I'll check back and look at what the comments say later too. Thanks so much for coming, and the High Altitude Garden Series class that we're going to do on Monday is all about soil health and bed preparation. So if you're starting to get the idea of having a garden this year and you want some ideas for what to understand some of the basics about soil health and how to get your garden ready, you should watch. It'll be on Monday at 4:30 p.m. We hope to see you then. Bye.